melt is when I'm ocean wave.
Today on Never Legends podcast, I have two Cardinal officials, great guys, great officials, but also guys that are going to kind of explain where we are in terms of officiating. Scott Bach-Hansen. Scott has been officiating for many years. He also works for the NBA as a courtside administrator, and also Adam Brick. Adam has done more state finals than I have fingers and toes. He's very well regarded official, has done a lot of big games. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Julian. Appreciate it. Great to see you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, guys. Thanks for inviting me to your end of year podcast like you did last year. I guess I've fallen down the list of important guys.
We haven't done very many, Julian. So
Yeah,
we
average about one a year.
Yeah, we've done one this year, and that was with Isaac and Andre, and their great story.
Okay, well, you guys have great podcasts. So the other day I had the girls coaches, men and women who coach girls basketball on, and we talked about some of the issues that are affecting the game. One of which was they had heard that there's going to be some two-man crews, two-person crews in January, and also some of the other issues. One of which is there's been a meeting of coaches at the 10-minute mark before the game, and there are some questions of whether that's necessary, and other things that have come up as well. So anyway, I thought we'd get together and maybe address some of these issues.
Yeah. Adam, I'll start. I'll tackle the 10-minute one, and you can start with the other one, I think.
Okay, that's fair.
So this meeting at the 10-minute mark that has been required, I think there's a misnomer out there that the coaches believe that this is a Cardinal thing, that you have to be there. If not, you get a technical foul, and that actually couldn't be farther from the truth as far as a Cardinal thing. This is something that the VHSL has mandated of all of their officiating associations. Now, whether some officiating associations decide to follow through with that or not is one thing, but it is definitely not a Cardinal mandated aspect. We have been required by VHSL to enforce it, just like we enforce the rules of basketball. And so I will tell you that we're probably about as happy in doing this on a regular basis as some of the coaches. We understand why it's being done. There's some goals in trying to build some opportunities for discussion to make sure that we don't have any issues with uniforms before the game, and to also just make sure that we have an opportunity to have open dialogue. The challenge with that is I think there's a lot of coaches that feel that we're making them do this, and I will tell you that that's not something that we're interested in doing. It for the coaches that were at the meeting at Woodson, I think they kind of got a grasp of there's some changes going on with the VHSL, and I think they were they found out that night that they were in a larger district than they planned to be. They tried to have a meeting for 60 people, and I think 1,500 showed up.
That's awesome. There's that much interest.
Well, it's mandatory. They made it mandatory. And so
it was the rules clinic, Julian, that you've been to many times before.
Okay.
That had been virtual for the last couple of years. That they changed this year to in person, and it was at Woodson High School, and it was, an overwhelming attendance.
I miss those days.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do.
I will just share that that was also not a Cardinal meeting, but what we saw that what was happening is they were overwhelmed, and we tried to step up and help them. Obviously, Woodson is one of the schools that we cover, and majority of the officials there were from Cardinal or from our neighbors in Bull Run or some of the other outlying associations. So we just wanted to step up and help them. But that was not a Cardinal meeting. That was, again, a VHSL meeting. So I think just to try to set the landscape correctly, that we're not requiring, that we're not telling the coaches you have to do this. VHSL is telling us we have to enforce it.
Yeah.
And-
So I would liken it to almost like the pregame captains meeting that we have. As you know, Julian, we all do a little bit different things when we get those the captains together, right? Some of us short and sweet, others will expand upon the rules. I think that pregame meeting with the coaches, if we look at it as an opportunity to improve and expand communication between referees and coaches, I think that's a great thing. I think it's not necessarily a great thing if all we do is, are your teams properly equipped and be good sportsmen tonight. I mean, I think that's not talking with them, that's talking at them, and I don't think that's productive. And mine, I get them together and I just say, "Good to see you. How you doing? Good luck tonight." I mean, it really is that short and sweet. And we do it because the Virginia High School League tells us we have to do it.
But one thing I'm hearing from the coaches is that the referees are being more communicative this year. They're talking to the players, they're talking to the coaches before the game. There seems to be a demonstrative effort for officials, Cardinal, to communicate more and to try to officiate outside, outside the book and outside the lines, which it seems to be very well appreciated. So I'm hearing that from a lot of coaches that they appreciate that. Before we met, I sent out emails to some of the coaches I've been talking to get some feedback, positive and negative. And that was a positive thing. They appreciate the definite determination by Cardinal to try to talk to the players and coaches and, not give technical fouls and not call fouls when you can just, talk players and coaches through situations.
I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
We, especially before the pandemic, we really started making a concentrated effort to allow the coaches to have a voice. We would have a coaches roundtable every year for 4 years in a row, where we would have a handful of boys coaches and girls coaches come and have a roundtable that Adam would moderate and let the coaches share, some things that were important to them. The most outstanding thing that we heard constantly over and over again is, I just want to be heard. I want to be communicated with. And so we've worked on that from a training standpoint. I was involved or responsible for training for a number of years. And a lot of that was focused on those communication skills. As you can imagine, with 350 plus officials,
Wow.
we have people at different levels of communication. Not everybody can be Adam Brick or Scott Bach-Hansen or Gil Mack or Marvin Dawkins. Everybody has their own style. And we have a lot of officials that are introverts and they don't thrive in that area. So to get consistency, from different crews to different crews, we've kind of thrown out the window. We try to make sure we have consistency within the crew of the game. But I think that's one of the things that we really tried to get going. And I thought we were starting to make traction in the pandemic hit. So that kind of, we were told we're going to knock off communication because 6 feet distance, everybody's masked,
That's right.
and so forth. So that kind of changed things. But I've the coaches that you had on the other night, I believe it was Fred and Amanda and Noel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Was it 3 or did you have more than that?
I think it was just 3 that night. Yeah.
So perfect example. All 3 of them have different styles. I remember when Amanda first started coaching, she would say, excuse me, Mr. Official. And it was almost like, you felt bad if you didn't respond to her. And she's grown as a coach in her communication skills with us. And we've learned how to do them with her. Fred's style is a lot different than hers.
Yeah.
And for Noelle, she loves to talk. And by the way, for those of us like Adam and I love doing her games because we can have a dialogue about the game and talking about things and sometimes share some good laughs.
Yeah.
But that's not for everybody. So Adam, I'll let you jump in on this too.
No, I think that's right, and I appreciate those comments, Julian. I think as an association, we work really hard. One of the words that we use a lot with our officials is empathy, having an understanding and appreciation for what coaches and players are going through. It's not easy what they do, particularly for the coaches. And so I think, trying to get a better understanding of what they're going through and listening, and just acknowledging that you've heard what they had to say goes a long way. The worst thing, and the worst thing a referee can do is ignore what a coach is saying,
Yeah.
particularly if they're not doing it in a unsporting or derogatory way. They're frustrated a little bit, or they just have a question, or they have a comment. You don't have to answer everything, but just some form of visible acknowledgement. Doesn't even have to be audible. You can just nod your head. So we've worked with folks on that, and I think, as Scott said, people just have to have their own style, learn what works for them. But we make it pretty clear that you just can't ignore them. It doesn't work, and so that's been a big effort on our part.
Yeah. I go to a lot of games, and I think the Cardinal officials are doing great. I mean, you're never going to have every game perfect.
Would.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're gonna have issues, and I go to watch, and I'm always very proud to have been a former member of Cardinal. I was at a game the other day. Hayfield was playing Jackson Reed, and they were officials. They weren't board 12, and they weren't Cardinal. I don't know where they were from, but it was
134 PG County.
Oh my God, it was really tough, and they didn't have any of the professionalism. Like at halftime, they didn't leave the court and go to an office. They just like put chairs in the middle of the floor and just kind of just chilled, and I felt like for good or bad, the game suffered that day. And I think that's one thing we don't have in Northern Virginia. We have officials that definitely try. Every game's not going to be perfect. We're going to miss some things, but I definitely think we have a group of officials that are trying to do things the right way. So,
and if I could just add one thing to that, and honestly, Scott's the president now. He transitioned from the vice president in charge of training, and he's the president now. But we stand on the shoulders of those that have come before us. And you go back to the days of Ralph Gordon, Steve's dad,
yeah,
and Cecil Hurst and Joyce Sisson and Mickey McDade. The list goes on. And Cardinal has been a strong professional organization for decades. And our job is we've got the baton now, and our job is to pass it along to the next generation as they're coming up. And it's just a tradition, and we got to continue it. And I think that's why we're so good, because we've been that way for a long time, and we're just trying to build on what has been built in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely see that commitment, and it's definitely appreciated. I think again, every game is not going to be perfect, and I mean, working the officials is part of the game. But I definitely think there's at Cardinal, you're going to get professional folks that try their best to give you a good game. But let's get to one thing in particular that folks are worried about. It's the two-man crew, and I talked to you guys about this before, and I've talked to Steve Gordon about it when I interviewed him. I think two good officials can do a game extremely well. You guys have both were around when there was two-man crew. We could definitely do this, but I think there is a sense from the folks on the panel the other night that when they go to two-man crew, it's going to be less than a great game. I don't feel that way, but I think we've sold officiating that three-man is much better. So what do you say to coaches that are afraid that when we go back to two-man crew, they're not gonna get a great job from the officials?
Well, I guess what I would say is, number one, it's not going back to two-man crews. I think it's a blip in the radar where we have to do two-man crews next week, because of the lack of availability of schools to play on other nights because of what goes on in the Fairfax County school calendar, and the availability of officials. You couple all of that together, and the growth of schools. I mean, Julian, when you and I started refereeing, there were probably, I know when I started refereeing, there were only 4 high schools in Loudoun County.
Yeah.
right? It was Broad Run, Parkview, Loudoun County, and Loudoun Valley. Now there's what, 18, 19, 20? And if you, as you recall back then, with the 3 classifications in Virginia, girls single A and double A played in the fall. So it was not uncommon as officials for us to sit home on a Tuesday or Friday night at any given time, because there were more officials than there were games to assign. That's clearly changed these days because the supply and demand issue has changed on both sides, right? There's way more games and way more slots because we have gone to 3-man officiating, and there are not as many officials and not as many, and Scott will appreciate this, not as many available officials. Because we do have referees that actually do have other things to do in their lives, as well as they referee either other associations or other levels. So yeah, there are nights where we're going to have to do 2 next week. Is that ideal? I would say no. I do believe 3-person officiating at the varsity high school level is a plus. I think the game is better officiated. We have to guess a little less when there's 3 versus when there's 2. I also think when you go back to 2 after having done 3 for so long, it's a little bit more difficult as an official in terms of where to look and what your responsibilities are. Obviously, the physical toll, but we went to 3. I mean, we went to 3-person officiating in Cardinal back when we still were 3 classifications and the girls were playing in the fall for single A and double A. Because I remember being at that meeting with Don Cronin and Cecil Hurst, where we discussed it with the various counties about that we were going to 3. And the Loudoun school said, fine. This was a September meeting at some point. They said, that's fine as long as you can start next week with the girls program in the fall. And we did. So, you know, it's when we went through this last year and the year before, when I was the president, you know, we did talk with the schools about it. And, you know, our contacts are the area athletic directors for each of the counties in the school system. And then our assigner, Doug DeVault, deals with the BSAs or the ADs at all the schools. But we were not going to put ourselves in a position where we, as an officials association, decided which games needed 2 and which games needed 3. We're not going to make that value judgment. And so on the nights where we had X number of games versus X number of available officials, we've got a quantitative measure that says that's a 2-person night because we just don't have enough. And we've told schools, if you have a particular game that you believe needs 3, you can accomplish that by switching the date or going to a double header if you can do that. We can figure that out. But we're not in a situation where we're deciding game by game which gets 2 and which gets 3. We're doing that on a night by night basis. And this, I think next week is the only 2 nights that we have where we're going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. The games that I've been to probably 15, 20 games this year, and there hasn't been a game where I felt one of the officials of the 3 on the crew didn't belong. So, I mean, the crew looked like to me that they're working well together. They're all, you know, varsity level officials. So I mean, it seems to me it's been well staffed so far.
Yeah, we have. I mean, again, what Carl Armstrong built before Scott and what Scott built upon our training and development program, where we evaluate. I mean, you know this. You've been there. We evaluate non-varsity officials and decide who's ready to move up either on a night-by-night basis to get a varsity game or permanently to get varsity games. It's a painstaking process, and it's something that people have to earn. Yeah. We don't just put people on varsity games. I realize that some people may think that, and some people think we go to Foot Locker to get referees because they had the stripes, but it's not what we do. And I think that goes back to the professionalism of Cardinal. Do we make mistakes? Absolutely. Do we have bad games? Absolutely. Sometimes do crews not mesh? Absolutely. But I think the 3-person product is a far better product at the level at which Northern Virginia high school boys and girls basketball is being played at the varsity level than having 2 people do those games.
Yeah, I agree. Scott, do you want to add something to that, or?
Well, I was just going to talk something what Adam was talking about. We've really focused, when I took over as vice president 7 years ago, the goal was that we needed more people to be able to be 3-person capable, 3-person ready. And so we did an all-out blitz on our training, and we created these camps that is now known as the Steve Gordon Basketball Officials Camp, where we teach 3-person mechanics. And so going back to 2-person is not what we want to do either. And I heard Noel say something about, well, we can do Saturdays if we have to. And sometimes Saturdays are actually tougher because I would say that you're going to find good officials everywhere. I think I am very proud of what we've done training wise. And I think it's shown because each year we have more state final officials than any other association. And number 2, we probably have more people that get pulled up to the college ranks. And the officials that we send through training that don't get promoted find themselves working varsity for other associations because maybe we're just at a higher standard. The challenge with that though is when we have big nights like this and our officials are being pulled by these college associations or they're working for these other high school associations on big nights like what we have next week. It's kind of the perfect storm of why we do things. And you mentioned something in the podcast last week when I listened to it, Julian. One of the things, one of the beauties of 3-person is it helps elongate some careers.
Yeah, definitely.
It helps us keep some guys and gals around for a few extra years just because they can save their legs a little bit. As far as being able to referee the game, it's almost like an answer to the 3-person. I guess it depends on who they are. We have a lot of officials that do recreation ball, men's level recreation ball that do 2-man. They're comfortable with it. We have a lot of people that have worked 2-man in the past. They're comfortable with it. I would tell you that if you got Gil Mack and Adam Brick to walk in your gym, you'd probably be pretty happy that you had that 2-person crew. So I think it's also just depends on what you have. And, if you have a style of play like the way that Yorktown plays or Yorktown boys or the way like Woodgrove girls play or the way that Lake Braddock used to play, that's going to be really difficult on a 2-person crew. So it's a difficult job for our commissioner, one that I don't envy him for, to have to find not only the right 2-person crew, but if he's got West Potomac at Hayfield, that they're probably going to get up and down the court. So we need to find 2 people that are not only solid officials, but we also need to make sure that they have the ability to stay with the play. So you'll probably see guys like Glenn Gist and Ian McClinney on those kind of games because they run like deer.
Yeah. As a 56-year-old former official, I've toyed with the idea of getting back into it. And it would
Come on, let's go.
That's right. But 3-man crew would be no problem. I mean, the game is always challenging, but in terms of the fitness and the running, it's no problem. But 2-man crew it's a different thing. I mean, you gotta work. So if you're doing 2-man, I mean, you're covering a lot of ground, and I mean, there's accountability, but you got to work. So
So the 2-man game, 2-person game to me is more mentally challenging than it is physically challenging, quite honestly.
Is that right? Yeah.
I think so, because you really have to discipline yourself to look off the basketball and look in spots that you might not otherwise think you need to look. So I think it's more difficult. I mean, you watch some JV basketball games on some of the bigger courts and you go, this one could use 3. I mean, there are some of them. Now, again, you might have a varsity basketball game, both boys and girls, that when it's all said and done, you go, yeah, this could have been done with 1 official, not 2. Forget 3. But we don't know that ahead of time. Right. And again, we're not going to make those value judgments on which of those games should get 2 and which should get 3. I remember going to a game. It was either last year or the year before. I did work a game with Glenn Gist 2-man. It was South County at Hayfield. And, I knew the coaches weren't going to be particularly happy with only 2 of us. And this was before we had to go over the 10-minute mark, but I went over to the table to take care of the book. And both coaches were standing there together. And I just walked up to both and said, listen, there's only 2 of us tonight. And I looked up at the clock. There was about 12 minutes to go before the game. I said, you got 12 minutes to get it all off your chest now. Once the ball goes up, I don't want to hear about 2-man anymore, because we're going to have a hard enough job as it is tonight. And they were both great, and it was a great game.
Well, as Fred said, it'll be nicer to a 2-man crew. And I remember the days where it was 2-man and then one guy wouldn't show up and you do a game by yourself. And
They were really nice to you then.
yeah, they were always nice because they were just glad you were there. So they were like, "Oh my God, you're my hero. You actually showed up." So
Right.
I think there is going to be an issue of that. So look, we'll do the best we can. We're going to have a couple of, week or two of challenging games where there'll be maybe 2-man crew. The coaches, they want to know what can they do in terms of scheduling to help you avoid this situation in the future. That was a question that I did get.
I mean, to me, it's an easy one. And I mean, I'll take it, Scott, because we've been through this so much before. They got to work with their ADs or their DSAs because that's who gets the information about what are the heavy nights, and find out from their DSA what night are we getting 2, and if they think it's a big enough game that they want to have 3, then reschedule the game to a different night. That's what they can do in the immediacy of the moment, outside of what the stuff that Scott talked about in terms of helping us recruit new people. I'll tell you the other thing they can do. I think one of the tougher things about retention of officials, it's not behavior of coaches, it's not behavior of players, it's the behavior of fans. And so whatever coaches and schools, administrators can do to help educate, police, adjudicate the fan behavior will go a long way in helping us retain officials, because the environment is getting worse.
So I asked my kids one day about whether they give their teachers a hard time, and my kids go to Yorktown, and I forgot if it was my son or my daughter said to me, "Dad, we don't give teachers a hard time." At this point, we realize they don't make a lot of money. And, obviously Yorktown, the parents make a lot of money. And if you give teachers a hard time, you are looked down upon as being a real, not a nice person, to keep it G-rated. So they have the mentality that officials need, and that, look, we have an official shortage. We need folks to want to do this. And there's actually great pay for officials now, so it's actually a good opportunity. But no one wants to get abused, no matter how much money you're making. So we need to kind of change the mentality in that, we don't want to abuse the folks that come out and make the games possible.
I would just piggyback onto that and share a couple of things. One is, I think the coaches and officials can relate with each other a lot more now than they could maybe years ago. We both have a difficult job. I mean, for some reason, I picked 2 different careers in basketball officiating and being a minister, where you're expected to be perfect and you only get better. But what I found is that at the end of the game, I go home to my family. The coach is getting emails or texts from parents saying, "Why didn't Johnny get more time? Why didn't Susie, why wasn't she in at the end of the game? Why isn't my kid starting?" And they have to deal with all that stuff. And I never want to have to go through that piece of the game of basketball like they do. On the flip side, though, there are a lot of times where we're just out there to try to do the best job we can. And sometimes I think that there's a thought that we actually care who wins. And we just don't want the game to go into overtime.
Because we don't get paid extra.
Right. But sometimes I will tell you, I've had an overtime game or 2 where I'm like, I hope they keep playing because it's a lot of fun, and there's some great games. And I feel like I have, and I know Adam does too, some really great relationships with coaches, and feel like I try to be open with them. I try to be fair with them. We were doing such a good job of being able to get some videos and talk about plays. And then we had a couple of bad eggs really spoil it and send nasty emails about the games. And so we had to put in some pieces that all conversations go through the DSAs. And that was actually the DSAs wanted that because they didn't know that their coaches were doing some of these things. What I find that would be there's 2 things I'll transition here if I can about where can coaches really help us. One is, so we run a camp in the summer, the Steve Gordon basketball officials camp, and I had a conversation with one of the coaches this year that we have some of the people that are on the court. They just finished their first year, or they're doing college intramurals. They're not even part of an association yet. They're brand new officials. And we have coaches acting like it's the regional championship or the state championship. And the abuse that's given to these young officials. And I had a few of them say, if this is what this is about, I don't want to be part of it. That's really difficult, especially when it's camp, right? If you're in a regional final, there's an expectation that those conversations may happen, and the officials that are on those games are equipped. But a kid that's a sophomore at UVA that just gets out on the court for the first time, and we have a coach running up and down the sideline screaming, somebody coming out on the court pointing the finger in an official's face at camp.
Yeah,
it's a bad scene. So I'd ask for help there. Look, come yell at Adam and I. We can handle it, right? Myself, Adam, Dickie V, Carl, Gil, Steve, come talk to us. We're there for that. But let's not minimize what these kids are dealing with. And I think a lot of that comes, not to paint the picture that this is all an AAU mentality, but I think that's part of where some of this comes. I think the second piece where coaches can help us is, you have players that have graduated. They've gone to college. There are intramural programs where they can go out and referee basketball and get paid. And then when they come back, we can turn them into quality basketball officials. And we have a number of them that have played, for basketball in this area and have come back and refereed. But we'd like to have more. So when you have those pickup games, when they come back, you have that alumni night, when you have those opportunities where somebody says, hey, how do I get into coaching, or what can I do to stay in the game? Think about this. There are Division I referees that make $3,000 plus a game. 3 games a week, that's, you're looking at $10,000. NBA officials in their first year are making $150,000 plus. We have 3 officials in the NBA program right now.
awesome.
And so actually we have 5. I'm sorry, I forgot about the Barnett brothers, but we have 5 that are in the G League. And we have so many others that are on that path. We have a young lady who was the starting point guard and captain at the University of Kentucky for 4 years. She's now being an NBA monitor. She's in her 4th or 5th year of officiating, and she has 20-something Division I games. We have the former all-time leading scorer in CNU basketball history. Played overseas professionally for 10 years. Now she's with us. So we're finding some really solid opportunities, but they're gone in a few years.
Yeah.
Because they just get plucked up.
Yeah.
So if you can help us with recruiting, that's what I would like to share.
So my son, who's standing over there, he goes to UVA and he was a soccer player, and I'm trying to convince him, because that's how I got started. I refereed every night at intramurals, and then the guy said, "We should be doing high school." And I started doing high school. I was 19 years old. I was in high school, and the money then is nothing like the money is now. And his concern is, "So, Dad, I didn't play basketball." I said, "They'll teach you, and then you'll learn. Just you're out there, and you'll make some mistakes, but you'll blow your whistle, and you'll figure it out, and they'll teach you." People. One thing about officials, there's always another official that's willing to give you advice. Sometimes you don't necessarily want the advice, but it's it's always there. So it's good money. It's fun. I know when I was in school, I would travel from Charlottesville to Cumberland, to Stanton, to Waynesboro. It was a great way for me to get away and just to see the rest of the state. I learned a lot, met a lot of people, but it is a great opportunity. I hope folks will take advantage of it. And the money's great now. It wasn't great when I was doing it, but it's great now.
The money is good, but I'll tell you the biggest thing for me has been, I'm not even sure how long I've been refereeing, but it's been a long time, and it's the lifelong friends that I've developed, including my wife, through officiating. And so to me, it's that brotherhood, sisterhood of officials, coaches. I mean, we'd be remiss. I know Scott Scott and I were at the funeral this past weekend for John Costello, the former basketball coach at Broad Run High School, who died in a tragic accident on vacation. But it's those relationships that we've had the opportunity to build over these many years that'll last with us for a lifetime, and hopefully, beyond whatever's beyond. Scott can get into that. That's his area, not mine. But I think that's an important piece to it as well. Is developing of relationships.
It is, Adam, and it's one of those things that referees do get a hard time from coaches, players, and fans. But I was at a game earlier this year where I thought the official, he called a couple technical fouls he didn't really have to, and which happens. And and the fans didn't, after the game, they walked off. They didn't give him a hard time. I do think that they do get a hard time and sometimes, but generally I think people understand that officials do make mistakes and they're human. And 99 out of 100 times they're going to leave and it's going to be fine. So, even when things don't go well and there's technical fouls and the game is a little bit ugly, they're fine. They drive away. Everything's fine. So I don't want to create the impression that it's like it's a jungle out there. It's not. I mean, even when the referees make mistakes and affect the game, generally things are going to be fine. So
at the end of the day, I mean, you're right. At the end of the day, I hate to put it this way, it's just a basketball game.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, no, the games that we're refereeing, for the most part, nobody's livelihood is dependent upon the outcome of these games. At the collegiate level, professional level, coaches and players, they need to win, right? The high school level, I mean, you look at the coaches in high school, they're not doing it for the money. They do it for love or a passion for the game.
Yeah, they love it. Yeah.
And that's how most of us started, and the reason why we continue to start or continue to stay in officiating, because we love it. We have fun doing it. We take it serious, but you got to have fun doing it. If you're not going to have fun doing it, it ain't worth doing.
And not only that, but we feel for our brothers and sisters in the coaching community too when they go through difficult times. Obviously we know about what the honoree family went down through with Kyle, and Woodgrove had a tragic situation with a player. Just recently, that there's 3 kids in an accident in South County where two of the kids were killed. John Costello retires. They go on their dream trip because now they can go somewhere during basketball season, and he's killed in a car accident.
Yeah.
It's tough. And I will tell you that it goes both ways too, because when my wife and I had COVID before the medications came out, the vaccines, we were in bad shape, and neither of us could cook. Neither of us could get out of bed. And we had the basketball community. There was a lot of referees, but I will tell you, there were some coaches that brought meals over to my house. Andre and Isaac, if you haven't heard that story, you can go on our Inadvertent Whistle podcast where we interviewed them, where Andre needed a kidney basically to live. And one of our officials, Isaac, gave it to him. And there were coaches that reached out and wanted to support them. And I look at it as that's what really I have hope for, is we have some really, really good people. And sometimes we get passionate and sometimes we get sideways. But at the end of the day, we're all human. And, I think that, if I hope that if you saw me in a store or at a restaurant, that you wouldn't try to avoid me, that you'd come by and say hi, because I would like to come by and say hi to you, and hope that we have that decent relationship.
Yeah. Hey, I also want to mention the guard at in Washington Liberty that died in a tragic.
That's right.
By
Yep.
John
Yeah,
Jarvis.
I reached out to. Part of the thing also is we have a chaplain team. Obviously, as a pastor, I'm one of the chaplains.
Yeah.
And so we do reach out behind the scenes to the communities and coaches. West Springfield, I reached out to Dermia a couple of years ago. They had a tragic event. We're we're all human. We're all in this together. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that because of competition and because of the way we are. But I really hope that that we continue that aspect, because I think that's more what I'm in it for than having to get a text at 1 o'clock in the morning because the coach is very upset at the way the game was called.
We'll get those two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great, guys. I really appreciate you saying that. One thing I got from the coaches as well is one of the coaches wanted to know, is there any particular areas of focus that they should be talking to the kids about this season? Like, like travels or, whatever it is. Is there anything that they should be talking to the kids? Like, look, the officials really want to focus on this area this season.
Sportsmanship. It's the biggest one. There's this new thing where if you step over somebody, you gain this, you're over them. I don't know what it is. I think it maybe comes from football, but somebody makes a basket, the defender tried to take a block, maybe got called for the blocking foul. Now the offensive player has to step over him to show that he dominated him, or the flexing, or man, there was a kid that played at Hayfield a few years back named Brian Cobbs. Maybe my favorite captain of all time. He had a couple of teammates that were less than sporting, if you will. And I just remember him going, and he called me by my name, and that was fine. Scott, I got him. And that stands out more to me than anything else. I remember sitting with Dwayne Simpkins, the assistant coach at George Mason. We were at Lake Braddock watching a game, and there was a player who ended up playing at a small level Division I, but he was there to recruit him. And he just didn't like the kid's body language. But worse than that, the father was walking up and down the sideline, yelling at the coach and yelling at the referees. And nobody was doing anything about it. And I said, so what do you think? And he goes, oh, he's a nice player, but I don't want that package. And so I would tell you that sportsmanship, and that comes from not just the players, but the whole group. And we really take it seriously. We're the only association in Virginia that gives out a sportsmanship award to one boys program and one girls program each year. And we give out a banner. By the way, I apologize to the Stonebridge girls program. Kyle, I have your banner. I will bring it to you from last year. But we really focus on sportsmanship. And that's one of the things that we really try to push on our side. If there's anything that we need to clean up, it's that. And that's one of the things that, I don't know, Adam, the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, that's been a point of emphasis.
Yeah, and I would add to that we also know that that's a two-way street. One of the things that's a part of our clinics and teaching is that don't talk at the kids, talk with them. If you want respect, you gotta put it out there. And so, the captains, like for example, the captains of a team are chosen for a reason. They're not picked out of a hat. They're the leaders of their team, and we ought to engage with them in that way. So. One of Scott and I, we always talk about our pet peeves, and I have about 2,723 of them. But one of mine is, you're at a gym like Lake Braddock, and the ball goes all the way to the long end of the gym. And, if an official tells a kid to go get the ball, that drives me insane because it's not the kid's job to go get the ball. If the kid does go get it out of the goodness of his or her heart,
it's great.
And we ought to say thank you when they bring it back to us. But it's those simple things that, that we have to make sure that we do so that it's done in return. It really is about, I hate to get corny, but I will. It's about the golden rule. Treat others as you'd have them treat you. It really is that simple. So that's the way I go about it as best I can.
Yeah, the other thing from a basketball perspective, Julian, since, I think some coaches are probably looking for that as opposed to just sportsmanship. We're seeing a lot of defenders trying to move into the space of the offensive player and play that really tight defense, and the arms that come through. The college rule now has added this cylinder thing, which has a goofy signal to it. But what we're seeing is that the defenders still moving into the offensive player creates a little bit more contact and we're comfortable with. And so we appreciate good defense, but if you're doing a full court press man to man and you're in the face of somebody and the fouls are 5-0 against your team, it's probably because of the way you're playing defense. So
It's
keep that in
interesting,
mind.
guys, because I've been away from the game since 2005, and I really haven't paid attention at all. So I came back a couple of years ago. The biggest differences in the game is, first of all, a lot less trash talking. I mean, 15 years ago, the players were every single foul talking trash, every single dunk layup in the face. That's gone today. So what you guys are talking about, it does happen, but it's so much less than 15 years ago. That's
just the way you played when you played at Robinson.
exactly. I never dunked though. But one thing today that it's different is this Euro step. These kids take this extra step that wasn't around 15 years ago. That was a travel. So now we have a lot of these moves that are like in this gray area. I mean, what do you do with these things? To me, as a person that's been away from the game that came back, that's the biggest difference. I think the game is actually cleaner now. I think the game was more physical and more trash talking 15, 20 years ago. But this Euro step thing is everywhere. And I see it. And as a guy that, I haven't officiated in many years, I see travels, but now that's a good move. That's a layup now. That's like the biggest difference as an official that's been away that's come back.
So you're right. It's a good move, but I will tell you that we screw up 2 travel calls as officials, just in general, not Cardinal, but just as officials at the high school level more than anything else. One is the Euro step, like you said. The other one is you see it.
You're saying Euro step is okay.
Yes.
You're okay. Okay.
Yeah. When done appropriately. And the other one happens more in the girls' game because they're a little bit more fundamentally sound around the basket, and that's that step through, where they pivot and now they step through and lift the pivot foot to go in for a layup.
The up and under.
The up and under, and it is not a travel. And because it looks like a travel, we screwed up all the time. I've done more trainings with video clips of this is not a travel, and sure enough, we make a call. I will tell you what doesn't help us is the NBA has a different rule. They have a 0 step. So when they catch the ball, their first step is considered a 0 step. So that's why it always looks like when they take 3 steps, they travel. But in their game, it's not a travel. And so, and I get access to all their videos, through my job, but it gives us a different lineage, because now what happens is the players see that at the high school level and they go, oh, well, James Harden's doing that step back. Why can't I? Well, you can't because it's travel. And sometimes his is a travel too that they miss, but it is definitely something that you see trickle down on the travel side of things. And honestly, we do a much poorer job at the girls level. And so for Fred and Noelle and Amanda that were on last week and all the other girls coaches, we have focused on this over time about travel calls that we've missed. And we're hoping that it will improve.
Yeah, and one of the things and to me, traveling, quite honestly, is the hardest call in basketball. I think for me personally, that's the hardest call because the kids are so fast, they can do so many things.
And we were taught to referee the defense when we started.
Right. So what I was taught philosophically, and I believe it to this day, is if you're going to make a mistake on a travel, the better mistake is to miss a travel that's there than to call one that's not there. Because the swing that you can have in a point differential is greater from taking away a legitimate basket from a team and awarding it to the other team. So just because it looks funny doesn't mean it's a travel, doesn't mean it's a violation. If looking funny were a violation, they would have never let Scott and me referee, right? So I think that's the thing. It doesn't bother me when coaches ask for traveling. The thing that doesn't bother me, but one of my pet peeves, I wish coaches would not tell me what the fouls are because I can read the scoreboard as well as they can.
Yeah. Well, First of all, I think generally that's a great philosophy. Don't call anything when if it's close. you should err on the side of not calling it. But to me, as a fan of the game, notwithstanding, talking to officials on how to actually call a game, the official's job is not to even up fouls, even up the scoreboard, and it's to examine a foul and try to let the players know and coaches know what's going to be a charge, what's going to be a block on that particular night. And it's not to make them even. It's just to establish that's going to be a charge. That's going to be a block.
I'm so glad you said that. Let me clear this up because we do not teach that. What we do teach though is, look, if the fouls are 5-0, there's a few things. One is know why you're there, right? Have an answer. So when the coach says, "Hey, it's 5-0," well, you're in a 2-3 zone, or you're in a full court man-to-man with trapping principles. They're in a 2-3 zone. You're shooting a lot of outside shots. They're trying to get through so there's a lot of different conversations to have there. But what we tell them is, look, we're not telling you to go find something at the other end. But what we're telling you is you better not miss it. Because if it's 5-0 and now a kid goes in for a shot and gets bumped and we don't have a whistle, it looks bad. And the optics of it are that we're favoring one team as what the optics look like. So we're not teaching that. We're teaching them, know why you're there, and then make sure that you don't miss anything on the other end, and make sure you're being consistent with yourself, because I think that's a really important factor, especially at the high school level. At the college level and the pro level, there's different expectations.
It goes back to the communication that we talked about earlier. So imagine, you're a coach and it's 5 or 6-0 against you in fouls, and you're pointing that out to the official, but the official doesn't have an answer for that, or doesn't know how to address it, and so they choose to ignore it, and so that just continues to inflame the coach or incite the coach, because he or she feels like they're being ignored, when in reality the referee doesn't know what to say, or even worse, says, "Coach, I don't count them, I just call them," which I don't think anything will infuriate a coach more than that. So, we try to, and Scott's done a really good job with this in trying to teach officials, recognize the defenses, recognize what's going on. It's not just see a play and make a call. This is a thinking person's avocation, refereeing basketball, refereeing any sport, but you got to see the play, anticipate the play, not the foul, anticipate the play, let the whole thing happen. And then in that split second, make a decision: violation, foul, no call. At the same time, we were just down on the other end, and Scott had a little contact go at the hoop that he no called. For consistency's sake, if I have a very similar play at the other end, I got to call the same thing or let the same thing go. Not a makeup call, it's consistency.
Yeah, and I think to your point with that, Adam, is I had a couple of situations, but one that sticks out in general is a couple of years ago, Tim Lucas was still coaching at Lake Braddock for the girls. Now he's over at Fairfax, but they were playing West Springfield, a really, tough game, rivalry game. And one of his players, I called for a foul on a shot. And he said, "Scott, what did she do wrong?" And I just backed up to him and I said, "Nothing, I blew it. I made a mistake." And he goes, "All right, thanks. I can live with it." Because I'm just glad you don't make a lot. Well, little does he know.
They just don't admit to a lot of them.
Julian, the other thing that, and you as a fan can appreciate this too. I was at the Fairfax Woodson girls game, and I was watching the JV crew, and one of the teams is ahead by 30. And with 25 seconds to go in the game, we've got a 3-second call on the team down by 30. If I had any hair left, I would have pulled it out, because it just teaches, to Adam's point, we are not focused on the big picture of what's going on in this game. We're just looking at that play and everything's black and white. And we're just trying to get black and white right, instead of, you know what, I'm not going to call that.
I think this all falls under game management. I don't know if you guys still call it that, but so I was sitting with my son at a game, and there was a game where there was a call that could go on either way, and then they called a foul. One of the players argued about the foul, and they called a technical foul. And I was telling my son, who's not a basketball guy, I'm like, look, generally as a ref, when it's a call that you don't love, you don't generally give a technical foul because you don't want to double up on something that you don't love, but that's fine. Technical foul, it's fine. We'll go with it. Well, then another ref gave another technical foul because another guy wasn't happy. And I told him, I said, that's one you don't want. So you've already doubled up on a tech. So as another official, you just get away. You don't hear stuff that you don't have to hear because in the crowd, we didn't hear the second technical foul. But when the referee gave the second technical foul, like that's like game management. Of course, maybe they said something that they shouldn't have said, but that's one of those common sense things. Like, guys, it's not going well here. Let's get the ball in play. Let's get the shots. Let's get the ball inbound. Let's play basketball. Because if we keep trying to hear things, we're going to hear a lot of things. And that all falls under game management. And I think we're all agreeing here. It's one of those things where you have to all be try to be in line, and also just try to have common sense of what needs to be called and what you can kind of
well, and for coaches, the other thing I would say is thank you for sending us videos.
Yeah,
it has been one of the greatest teaching tools that we can have. And there are times where Adam and I will break down a game video on a specific situation or maybe a tough game. But we do it because we want to break it down and help the officials. And I'm more interested in the way that the flow of the game went and how they're working together as a crew than like whether they missed that travel call with 3:27 to go in the third quarter. But I will tell you that it is such a great teaching tool. Now the days of you sending out video with 15 plays to look at are over, based because we've had a couple of instances that it has to go through the DSA. But I think it's really important for us to be able to get those videos and be able to show and teach the ways. The last thing I want to say about going back to just the relationships. Sometimes we don't know what coaches are going through in their personal lives, and sometimes they don't know what we're going through. We had an official over the summer that was in really bad shape. It wasn't sure if he was going to live, and was able to get the right medical treatment and missed about 5 months of refereeing, but was excited to come back on the court, goes to referee a game at Wakefield, and a coach comes on the court, not even the coach on the game, the head coach comes out of the stands and yells at our official and pulls his team off the court. This guy was just happy to be there. He almost died. I mean, literally. Yeah. And we hear things like this, and I just wish that sometimes, and it's both sides. It's not just the coaches to officials, it's officials to coaches too. We don't know what they're going through. And we just need to be human with each other sometimes. And I think if we can do that, it would make things so much better for all of us. So
I agree with you, Scott. And I'll relate a quick story with a coach that I spoke with after a game one night in the parking lot. And he had actually lost the game, and we were talking in the parking lot, and everything was fine. We were talking about his team, and I commented on the play of one player, and he goes, Adam, I got to tell you, with that kid, first of all, he's got like a 3.8 GPA. I'm like, that's awesome. He goes, but sole goal is trying to keep him out of jail. Every immediate member of his family has either been in or is currently in jail. And so that's the sole thing I'm trying to keep him in school, keep him out of jail so he can go to college. And he's in college now. But again, we don't know. That's the thing. We don't know what's going on in other people's lives. So having that empathy, having that understanding, one of the things we talk to referees about is I look at a basketball game as my oasis away from the workday. It's an opportunity to go out and do the best job I can do. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. Usually it's a 50-50 call on that, depending upon who wins and who loses. Right? But it's an opportunity for me to enjoy the moment, but we don't understand what somebody else is going through. And so I don't have to go in there with guns blazing, I did a presentation, right? I did a presentation at our fall clinic. It was entitled "Don't Be an Ass." Just don't be an ass, right? You're laughing because you know what that means. You've seen officials who are just asses when they get the game. Just don't do it. Just be a normal human being, and what you want to get in return, put out there.
50% of it is just having common sense and being reasonable. And I mean, you might miss some calls, but just be reasonable out there. And
Oh, no mic to it. We're gonna miss calls.
we're gonna miss some calls.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Gonna miss them.
But if
No
you-
question.
Yeah. And don't double down on mistakes and just be human and reasonable. And you know what? That's the feedback is that we're doing that. Cardinal is doing that. You guys are you guys are professional. You're trying to be communicative, trying to talk to players and coaches. So the feedback is positive. I think, the only negative feedback was about the 2-man crew, but as I said before, I mean, we can work around that. You can get a great game out of a 2-man crew, even though maybe at this point it's not optimal. But anyway, guys, look, this has been great. You guys are great dudes. I appreciate you doing this. Great officials. Everyone keeps telling me I need to get back and officiate again. And I keep saying, guys, I've talked a good game the last couple of years on these podcasts and running my mouth. If you go out in the court, you got to perform. It's talk is cheap. Talk is cheap.
You can trust me. You can do what you can do it. It's a game. It's about believability.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, right? I mean, we tell if you can make the greatest call in the world, right? You know this, Julian. You make the greatest call in the world, and then as you're communicating it to the table and the fans and the coaches, they may not believe a damn thing you're doing because you don't look like you know what you're doing.
And on the opposite end, we have some officials that are out of central casting with great mechanics and everything looks great, and they haven't gotten a call right all game. But everybody's like, man, that guy's good.
Right. So please come back. We need you.
Yeah. Well, one thing about as an official, because I coached for so long, all the coaches knew that my heart was in the right place, so they always gave me the benefit of the doubt because they knew that I love the kids and I love the game. So we need more coaches, more youth coaches, folks getting officiating, players, because I think not that you have to be a coach or a player, but you do bring some credibility with you. So that's another reason to try it, to get into the game and try to officiate. But
Julian, my coaching career lasted 5 games. I coached for Yeshiva of Rockville, Maryland, and I was the first coach in their history not only to get a technical foul, because we prayed for the officials before the game. But not only did we get did I get technical fouls, I got ejected twice in those 5 games, and the rabbi told me, "Don't worry about coming back. We're good."
Yeah.
So then I was like, all right, maybe I should go be an official.
and the rabbi doesn't believe in confession, so you need to.
That's right.
It's one day a year.
That's right.
It's very efficient.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, guys, this is great. Let's do it more often, and hopefully before the year is over, maybe I can get you guys on with some of the coaches like last year. And I was gonna try to get them on today, but instead I just got questions for them instead. But let's keep doing what you guys are doing. We appreciate your work. The coaches do as well. Obviously, again, 2-man crew to me, no big deal. We'll be fine. But I know some of the coaches are concerned. But we'll get through this. But let's do this more often and keep up the great work.
I really appreciate you having us on, and thanks for doing what you do for not just Northern Virginia basketball, but all the sports now that you have embraced on your podcast.
Yeah. And bring your son with you when you come out to referee. We can use him too.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk him into it. I mean, he's a first year at UVA. I'm like, this is
father son crew.
I know.
Gary Caruso's dad, our son, just started refereeing with us and is doing great.
Is that okay? Yeah. I mean, it's great money and it's a great way to meet people. So it's a win-win. So
just tell them we have quite a few college aged females in our applicant class.
There you go.
Exactly. So
right.
That's my argument. So anyway, I'll let them listen to this podcast. But guys, again, I appreciate it, and let's do it more often.
All right. Thanks a lot, Julian.
All right, guys. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.